right? Versus, hey, we think it might be this. So we're like, so the counterexample is what they did with limited optics, right? They came out with limited optics, and they immediately went out and set high hit factors for limited optics for every stage before anyone ever shot it, right? And what we found out is it's way too high. Okay, and we all predicted this, but anyway, so there's two counterexamples where they did a fantastic idea of having everyone shoot the stages first and then doing the scores, which I think they should have done limited optics, where at the end of the provisional period, then going and looking back at all the scores for this year, 2023 or last year, and then rescoring everybody after setting high hit factor, but they didn't do that. So anyway, so 2203 was one of the stages that they rejected, and they rejected, I think, partially because I made a stink about it. But if you look at the scores here, the scores, if we scroll through all the divisions here, tab through them, yeah, look at all these graphs. So they look like they fit nice bell curves, but if you notice, they're different than all the bell curves we've looked at so far. And they're different how? They've got a really long tail that goes off to the right. Okay. So if you're just a data guy and don't know anything about the sport, that might not mean anything to you, right? We've got a good well matched bell curve. So what's the problem here, right? Well, the problem was setting the stage up in person. What we found, so 2204, it was a square shooting area, and there was two angled walls that came off the side of the square. And then there was a double stack behind the walls, a double stack with a no shoot in each corner, and then the top corner is the same thing, double stack no shoots. And the angle of those walls affected. You had to go all the way to this corner here to shoot the target that was back here. So the angle of that wall and the length really mattered how much of the target you could actually see and present. And at my club, we set it up, and we couldn't see the targets at all at how it was officially
Oh,
measured,
wow.
right? And we're like, okay, what's going on here? So
Ooh.
I took the measuring tape to the wall. Our wall, so the standard wall is 8 foot, right? Our wall
Right.
was 8 foot and 1 inch. So that 1 inch at that
Oh.
angle completely occluded the target. So we changed, like, we had to like move the wall around in order to try to get the intended vision, which was we thought was kind of leaning around the corner slightly, and you could see the whole thing. And so it was basically like, wow, just a tiny difference in how you set up the stage or the dimensions of your stage props had massively affected the target presentation, right? And so this kind of like hit home the point to me of like, well, making, like, first of all, one problem with classifiers, a lot of the classifiers, if you've ever set them up, they're not like where the targets are and walls are not very well defined, right? They're partially defined, how, like, and so they're very hard to get consistent every time you set it up, get them exactly the same. But then a movement stage like that, where, man, even the slightest dimension change on even with a well-dimensioned stage, a slightest change, even because you don't measure a 45-degree angle perfectly. No one's out there with a total station doing a survey to figure out the wall angles, and
Right.
so a slightest change in that and massively change the stage. So it kind of hit on the point to me of like, you really can't build complex stages and have it be a consistent classifier. And in my opinion, if if classifier shot at one club is not the same as the same classifier shot at another club, then it's not a classifier. It shouldn't be a classifier, right? It's not an equal measure of skill because they're different stages. How shooters see them and engage them, right? So I know I pestered USPSA about it when and they were like at the end of the provisional period. I know they will never admit or would say it's because of the posts and stuff that I was doing, but you know, we can hope that it might have been. But they threw this one out. And they rejected this classifier just because, like I said, yeah, it's not a classifier if you can't consistently set up the stage.
Right.
Um,
Now,
yeah.
I just saw somewhere someone was mentioning how IPSC did away with the classification system altogether.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Um, so I think, well, it's multifaceted here, right? I think classification. I think again, when we look at that national, even at the national performance, it's still reasonably stacked up. GMs beat M's beat A's, right? It reasonably stacked up like that.
Right.
So it is a reasonable measure of performance, but it doesn't measure super squad like top guys, right? It doesn't measure them very accurately, and it's missing skill sets that it can't measure, right? So there's there are deficiencies here. Um, I personally wouldn't mind if we didn't have classification at all, but especially since I help run several matches in my section, it's very clear that average shooters, a bunch of average shooters, really like classifiers, right? So that is a big selling point to new shooters. Is how do I measure up against the national standard, right? Because remember, I got into the sport. My dad said, if you think you're good at something, go and compete against people that are and find out. And so the
Right.
classification system, as limited or as many issues as it has, still is a way that attracts people to measure how do I stack up on the national stage. And I'm sure I could go to I could go to a totally different state, different section, shoot their locals, and still perform pretty well. Similar performance to how I do at my locals. But if I go to a nationals event, I don't know how I'd stack up. I probably wouldn't stack up that well, especially since I've been more focused on running matches than my own personal performance lately, right? So I think there's still value. I think there is still value in it, as flawed as it is, and I think it is something that really attracts people to the sport, whether it be USPSA or whatever alternate comes about. If there's a classification system, people will like it and want to shoot them. Um, I'm also really partial to a skill rating system, which Jay Slater, if you've talked to him, I'm sure he's explained his rating system. But
Yes.
essentially, I've done my own test development of a system as well, where if you're familiar with chess or video games, and video games also does this, but in chess, they what they have is called an ELO rating system, and basically you how your match, your game finishes, how you win or lose or draw in chess against another player, you can earn or lose rating points. And if you're a high rated player and you play against a low rated player, you're expected to win, right? So
Right.
if say, like, if I was shooting against Niels and I beat Niels, he would lose a bunch of rating points and I would earn a bunch of rating points, right? If we were to have rating point system. And that would just be purely on match or stage performance, right? So Jay
Kind of
does it
like
based on,
college football. Yeah.
yeah. um Video games, for people that play or are familiar with video games, which I'm sure nowadays is a good number of shooters. Um, like ranked modes in video games, they have under the covers, they have their own little rating system where it's the same thing. Like, you're expected to beat somebody that's worse than you, and you earn and earn your rating points to move up in rank or not. And both Jay and I, we have different methods, but basically both proven that this can be reasonably applied to competitive shooting, and it's more based on match performance. Like, Jay's looks at each individual stage, because it gives you more data if you look at every stage versus just the final match percentage. Um, Mine currently that I've tested looks at just match performance and at how you rate, and, like, at least with I've done with my section, it reasonably accurately ranks everyone's skills within the section, to what at least we feel like intuitively is a correct ranking, I guess, if you will, of the shooters in our section. Um, so it is actually a
So
decent way to doing it, an alternate
so
maybe.
Kurt, do you have like software skills then too?
Yeah, so I can program in Python. So I do all my analytical programming in Python. and for my PhD research, I had to develop the sensor system as well as all the analytics for neural networks. Yeah,
Okay. Goodness. You've got quite
yeah,
the array of skills.
yeah. I'm
Now,
a jack of all
do you
trades.
use AI with any of this stuff that you're doing with practical shooting?
No, no, I have not because AI is it's the voodoo of it can do everything but it can do nothing. Um,
Voodoo, I like it.
yeah, AI there's a lot of misconceptions with AI. There could be places to use AI in competitive shooting, but I just haven't really found them, to be honest.
I want to
And
find a way to use it to virtually shoot my classifiers. That's all I'm saying.
yeah, right. Like I, I've talked to Derek at Practical Shooting Insights, and he was going to do an AI system where on practice score, where you could the AI would look at all the practice score data and it could figure out which shooter was who was who, right? So like, and if you've ever dealt with practice score, every time you register for a match, you put your name and USPSA number, email, stuff like that. But you can input whatever you want, right? And no one's there to correct you except
Yeah.
for maybe your USPSA number when the match director uploads it to USPSA. And so there is a place for AI there where you could say have AI look at say a set of matches and say, well, this person is all of these particular scores, even if they're named wrong or different USPSA numbers, right? Like there's there's ways that AI could do something like that. Now I don't think he did develop it because it just sometimes with AI it's like, do you really need to? Like sometimes
Right.
with data is like you spend all this time programming something you don't actually need. Um, it's very true with software often case, uh, but yeah, so there is room for that. But yeah, I don't I haven't found anything that I want to spend the time to develop AI for in practical
Okay.
shooting.
But the software you've created for your local stuff, your ELO ratings,
Yeah,
you've been able to tweak it to the point where it's accurate in rating all the local shooters.
yeah, I think so. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um,
Interesting.
Now I've looked at trying to expand that to nationally, and what it comes down to is essentially needing the computing power and server space to have something that could make a rating system that's available to the public and automatically download stuff and that like to me was like, well, both too much effort than I can afford to do, as well as just the cost expense of running a server
A server.
is not like I said, I'm a PhD student. I'm not a professional yet, so I don't have the money
You're not
to pay for
Dr.
something like
Kirt
that.
McKenna yet.
Not yet. Yeah.
Okay. Now
Um,
I wanted, okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Yeah. So yeah, and Jay Slater, he has done the same with a very similar system, looking at majors, and his rating system from majors turns out to be really accurate too, in a
Hmm.
reasonable predictor of performance. Now, obviously, you can't predict the future, so things always change, right? But it is reasonable at predicting performance, as well as like if you had a classification system where say like GM means you were this skill and higher, right? Then that would actually be a reasonable way of doing it, and that wouldn't have you wouldn't have to do classifiers at all.
Yeah, I think the only issues that really come into play here to skew the data would be your Joey Sauerlands, who in a year time frame go from Joe Schmo to you know top three at nationals, and also your issues like again, I hate using JJ as an example, but JJ having the issue with the gun,
Right.
those are the only things you can't predict.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
otherwise I feel like it's what Jay is doing with his is very very accurate,
Yeah.
but
And
it's that
and a
human factor.
right. And then there's another potential pitfall, if you were to do that on a local level, is like the siloing effect, right? So all the local shooters in my section here in Colorado, right? Like we might have our own ranking and scores, but then all the local shooters over in Arizona might have, their own ranking. And so say like a 1500 from Colorado may not be the same as a 1500 from Colorado or from Arizona, because there's not a lot of like crossbreeding and not a lot of shooters shooting against each other from the different states. So like there is that potential issue as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to talk also because you also did some other stuff, which I
The
thought was very interesting.
Yeah.
Now, this is activity by state that you had created,
Yeah.
which I find very interesting. And I saw that you had created a similar map, but
Yeah.
I don't know if you use Flourish or who you use, but at least this way I can go in and we can see the numbers.
Yeah.
If
Yeah. Yeah.
it's actually
Yeah.
interactive. Um,
Yeah.
but I found this very, very interesting
Hmm.
where obviously California was the most active state in the country with over 21,000 matches in 2022. Now, I assume these are matches that had a classifier. Is that correct?
Yeah. So it was 21,000 classifier scores in 2022.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Not matches.
Okay.
Yeah.
21,000 classifier scores. All right.
Yep.
So California, then Texas, and then I think it's Arizona. Yeah, Arizona followed by Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
Okay. But I also found it interesting that while you had a few in here that had some higher, like your state, Colorado,
Yeah.
Washington wasn't bad. That was pretty good too.
Yeah.
But then, there's a lot of states mixed in there
Right.
that don't have very many numbers. And then you come over to the East Coast, like actually, New York shocked me with 7,000 classifier scores for 2022.
Right.
I, because of the gun laws, I would not have expected that, but
Yeah.
I was wrong. But there's a lot more on the eastern half of the country that have a bunch of scores than on the other. Now, I noticed someone had asked you if you were going to do all of the matches, but it sounds like that would be a very time consuming prospect.
Um. Yeah. So, at least at the time. So I've been doing a lot of this kind of in my spare time, and if you notice, I haven't been posting a whole lot lately because been both busy personally as well as uh, kind of just fed up with USPSA in some regards. So I haven't been
Okay.
as interested in posting, but so let me how I got the data. So what I did is I wrote a script that went to USPSA.org, their match results. So their published match results that everyone can go and look at, right? So I didn't hack their database, didn't do anything like that. I just looked to the web page, and each web page that had scores, I grabbed them. And it is time consuming in terms of like the bot that goes through and does that. And then my first pass, the first pass I've done, I've only grabbed classifier scores because the data adds up and gets big really quick. So I only wanted to grab classifier scores. So that's why I've been like posting like stuff like this is on a per classifier basis, rather than on a per match basis. And with this one in particular, how I got the states is I looked at the match, looked at the classifier score, and which club that the score the match was at, right? And then I also looked at the USPSA's, went through all of their clubs and recorded all of their clubs and like all the official affiliated clubs when I did when I made this post with March of 23. So I went in March, and who were all the affiliated clubs in March, and grabbed all of and like recorded them, and then correlated which match from which state shot which how many classifiers, right? um so that's how I came up with this plot and this data. And so to do it for every single match, it would be, it's a little bit more complicated. Got to record everything rather than just
Right.
classifiers. As well as since then, USPSA their IT team has added a like kind of an anti-bot measure. So my script crawler no longer works in USPSA, but I've gone to Practice Score and done the same thing on Practice Score, and Practice Score takes even more time because a lot more than USPSA matches are shot and recorded on Practice Score,
Right.
and like there's no data verification on Practice Score. So like if someone who's, I don't know, shooting NRL 22 posts that it accidentally presses USPSA when they select the match type and upload it that way, then like I got to go through and sort through their scores and make sure, is this actually a USPSA match. So just technically it's more difficult, as as well as just data wise, just more data. And I just haven't done that, and I found like at least in 2022, a lot of clubs are shooting classifiers pretty regularly. I know that's changing. I know like in my state in 2023, that certainly changed, where we clubs started shooting less classifiers, like starting to shoot only the minimum requirement um, for various reasons. And I know 2024, especially with all the protests going on, there's going to be even less uh, classifiers. So like if I were to do this again, I'd probably um, get it from practice score and just do every match, not just classifier matches. So, and that's just, yeah. Again, it's the reason why I haven't been posting is like part of it's just been busy, man. Trying to graduate. My wife wants me to graduate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I get that. I mean, I'm sure your wife wants you to move on to the next phase post post school.
yeah,
Now, what
but
program did you
yeah,
use to create your? And just I'll pull this up so other people can
yeah,
see what I'm talking about. Like this is what you had
yeah.
posted, and what
Um,
program do you use?
so I use Python pretty
Okay,
exclusively, and I don't remember which package in particular, but I think it's not like all my plots normally are from matplotlib package in Python, and this was, I think, something else that does state mapping. Um,
okay,
that can do mapping, and so yeah, so basically all programmed it all myself using these open source libraries.
gotcha.
Um, whereas like you, it looks like, yeah, you uploaded actually, yeah, some decent plotting tool that you got there.
Yeah, Flourish actually they're designed exactly for this. Like you can do political data, you can do population data, you could do disease data, you can break it down by county. I mean, it gets crazy. It took me a little while just to figure out how to do this. Um, but it's interesting how with the last map,
Mm-hmm.
California was far and ahead
Mm-hmm.
of everybody else. But in this case, because there's more animals in Montana than people.
Yeah,
The per capita is actually the highest number of classifier scores, which is pretty funny, actually.
yeah, yeah, definitely. But you can see, like I pointed out in the post too. The interesting thing is, like my state makes top 15 either way. We're definitely not top 15 in population, and then Arizona makes top five either way as well. But yeah, you can see that definitely
Right.
the more rural states have more activity per capita. Kind of makes sense, right? More people interested in guns, more rural, but not like totally rural either. And we're going out to shoot. And like Arizona, I wouldn't call a rural state, and they like shooting. They're really good at shooting down there.
Yeah, but the thing that I find interesting is like the it flipped. Like there were a few
Yeah,
states in the activity by state out west, and most of them were east, and now most of them are west with a few east.
yeah.
So
So
you have to go to like West Virginia and Maine are higher, but
yeah,
they also have fewer clubs and population. So it's very interesting.
yeah. And I lived in Texas for a few years. So well, look, Alaska's pretty popular, high too. But anyway, so I lived in Alaska
Yeah.
or Texas for a little while, and I did an internship in down in Texas down in 2018, and this was after I started shooting. So I brought all my equipment down there, like ready to go do some matches, and I was in Houston. At least at the time, like they were very uncoordinated compared to my section in Colorado, and there was like so few and far between matches, and I was like really shocked that Texas didn't shoot a lot. And then I did this post, and Texas, at least in total numbers, is really high. But when you look at per capita, it's, I don't know, middle of the pack kind of. And so it's yeah, kind of okay. It's like, okay, that makes sense. There's a lot of people, and those people shoot their matches regularly, but there's not a lot of matches per capita, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And like in California, if you look at the actual clubs, like most of them are Northern California. There's like a handful of clubs in the LA area. But yeah, almost all the activities in Northern California.
That would be interesting too if there was a way to break it down by club. You know what I mean? So location within that
Yeah, I
map. That would be
think,
interesting.
let's see, I think I have area code. So I could feasibly try to do it by a handful of area codes, but that yeah, at the moment is seems like more work than I'm interested in doing at the moment.
Right.
But I do have the area code information, so I could feasibly do the same plot by area code, or like,
Well, look, if
parts
you ever
parts
need
of states.
help putting this stuff out in some form or another, let me know. I'd be willing to help you. Oh,
Yeah.
that's not right.
And I could get 2023 data. So yeah, that something I could do. We could do for 2023 is I could download the data and somehow get that to you, repost it, and do something interesting with it. But
Okay. I mean,
see
even
how
if you
how
just
it's
do
changed.
what you've been doing, like with your
Yeah.
information on Google Sheets, you could always just post it there and send me a link.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So
true.
it's very interesting. That is for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and at least again, like I was surprised about California and Texas, in a way, because I figured that they weren't so interested in shooting that much. Um, but turns out,
Now,
obviously, because they're big states, big populations, that they do.
yeah,
Yeah,
right. Yeah. Even California, I mean, as far ahead as they were of everybody in the total number of classifiers, they're what, maybe a little above middle of the pack,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. Oh, that also reminds me. So there used to be an argument against raising production to 15, um, because of mag band states. And the
Right.
funny thing is, if you look at all of the mag band states, they have high USPSA activity, and let me tell you, they're not shooting 10 round max. They're shooting full capacity. So I think
Yeah.
the capacity arguments in terms of in Colorado included, no one cares about capacity, and law enforcement doesn't enforce it. No one cares. So like I know I understand the drama, and I understand why that was bad, but at the same time, USPSA was kind of correct in terms of literally nobody enforces it here, and that's true with almost every state except for probably New York and New Jersey, in terms of
Yeah.
enforcement of mag capacities. Um, but in terms of at matches, certainly, as far as I know, New York is the only state that matches do enforce 10 round max, that I'm aware of. I'm sure other states do, but you think like states like California, Colorado, obviously because of the cameo controversy, Washington State, like all those clubs are letting their shooters shoot max capacity. We're not requiring people to conform to the state law, um, and that's, I mean, multiple reasons. One is a match director. I'm not a law enforcement officer, so I'm not going to enforce that law on you. But I know, like in the case of like Cameo in Colorado, I think USPSA was in the wrong, right? Because they basically went out and said, "Hey, we know this is the law, and but it's okay if you break it because they say they're not going to enforce it, right?" And so there's the draw. Like
Right.
I think that's bad. That's really bad
I do
policy,
too.
right?
It is. Yeah.
Because all you need is to annoy some state government officials, and suddenly the state patrol is out there enforcing it, right? Even though they would
Right.
never
Somebody
enforce it
other than
with
the
any other
local
match.
sheriff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. And I just think it's bad optics in general as an
yeah,
organization to promote something like that,
right.
As much as I would love to shoot at Cameo,
Yeah,
and I think it would be a great place to hold nationals
yeah,
just because there are so many other options. The way that thing is wired for sound, there are so many things you could do
yeah,
media wise. It could be super, super fun. But
yeah,
I think until we get to that point where magazine capacity is not an issue, we just have to
right.
play it safe,
Yeah, and
unfortunately.
I believe our mag capacity ban is currently within the district court. I think. Um, and we had a former USPSA shooter testify at that, and from what I've read from the testimony, he did a very terrible job that made shooting look bad. So yeah, unfortunately,
And this is what got me when I was creating this map.
yeah,
You have Illinois, very big anti-gun, and Indiana right beside them. So they're right beside each other.
hmm
And Indiana's pro-gun, pro-Second Amendment, and you have more than twice as much participation in Illinois as you do in Indiana. Just
yep,
nuts to me.
right, right, and well, I think part of that is I want to say Wisconsin is pretty active. There's a lot of good shooters in Wisconsin, and there's a lot of clubs just over the border in Illinois. So I think in that like lower Wisconsin area and upper Illinois, I think there's just both obviously with Chicago, but I think there's just a lot of people that shoot matches in that region, and so I think there's a lot of overlap, interstate overlap, potentially
Okay. So they
for
just
people that go to
go
matches.
up
Yeah,
into Wisconsin and shoot there where
yeah, or
they
vice
could
versa.
literally
Yeah.
be safe in shooting full mags, right?
Well, or vice versa.
And come
People from
down, right?
Wisconsin coming down. Yeah. Um, so yeah, there are a handful of clubs. I remember when I was going through the list that are kind of like in that region where they're all about maybe an hour away from each other. Um, which at least in my section around Denver, any club that's within 2 hours is like everyone goes to it. So
I got you.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
I also thought since we were talking about the USPSA stuff, I'm going to go back
yeah,
to. Now,
hmm
here's one that we could drum up a little controversy on. You said a very rough estimate of revenue from classifiers and match fees being 560K in
yeah,
2022.
yeah,
Now, I thought when I saw that, I thought the interesting thing here would be taking that money, and I think you could really. It would be interesting to take that just as a rough estimate, that and then take all your 2022 data for nationals, all the money you brought in for sponsorships, um, match fees, that type of thing, versus all of your expenses for those things. Put in your 560, see what the difference is. And then let's just say for 2024, a guesstimate would be you take that same data for 2023. You determine that.
hmm
Let's say it's the same 560 just for argument's sake, and then all your cost for your nationals, and then roll that into one nationals. Compare it to this would be our cost if we did say a 5-day Monday through Friday match where you shoot 4 out of the 5 days. At the end of Friday, then the whole thing's over. But what would be the cost of something like that, or a 4-day match, compared to running 3 or 4 different nationals, and
hmm
look at that bottom line? I think that would be very interesting because I personally and several people I've spoken to think that's the way to go to reduce that number at the bottom being a negative number.
Yeah, I'm personally a fan or advocate of saying, instead of say doing 3 or 4 nationals, doing 1 or 2 and making them a day or two longer to accommodate more shooters, right? And
Yes.
more divisions. I think that's the way to do it, because I'm sure it's, rolling 2 nationals into one is going to be cheaper than hosting 2 nationals. I think that would be a better way of doing it. The only complaint, or the only opposition to that I've heard, is people going, well, if say production is on day 1 through 3 and everything else, and then day 6 is awards, the people that want to stay around for awards from production got to stay around an extra 3 days or whatever, and so they got to spend that money, and it's like, too bad, in my opinion. Like, I'm sorry that, like, if you want to stay around for awards, then do that. If not, then we can figure out ways to still recognize the people, even if they don't stick around for the whole week that the event is. Like, yeah. But that's the only thing I've heard of people that opposition to rolling multiple events into one. Um, Now, as far as like actual budget goes, like, I'm sure I could make some estimates, but we could easily come up with, we know how much nationals cost, right? How much the fee is to enter, right? So we could come up with a gross revenue pretty easily for how much nationals makes.
Right.
But I've
I agree with that.
Yeah, but I've heard, as far as how much it costs, the USPSA keeps it pretty close at hand. Obviously, they don't announce it on
Right.
a per match basis, and I've also heard that they don't even have a formal budget for a single event. They just throw it, and then whatever the final cost is the final cost, which to me is like mind blowing, right? And I know I've heard of other majors, even smaller majors like level twos, where match directors will do the same thing, and they'll just say, hey, it's $150, and then they blow out their budget, and then suddenly they're in $10,000 of debt just to throw the match. Like, I've heard of that being unfortunate common circumstance, where it's like, to me, again, that blows my mind. I would think, if I'm going to put on a major
Yeah.
event, I'm going to like get all my numbers figured out, and then we're going to price it based on staying at least net zero, right? Staying, like, trying to
Yeah.
break even. So to me, it blows my mind that they made it, an additional $500,000 on classifiers alone, and they still were over budget and went into $500,000 worth of debt in 2022. So like, what are they spending money on at nationals, right? Like, to me, the numbers are crazy.
Well, and aren't the classifiers and match fees supposed to go towards nationals? I mean, that's what I thought.
Uh,
So,
yeah,
I mean, but one of the
maybe.
things this guy, I just had oh my gosh, it must have been I think it was a 2 hour conversation with someone. I don't even want to hint at who it is because I don't want that getting out. But
Hmm,
he said the exact same thing. They're basically treating it like they have an open checkbook. So they don't care what the expense is. But I do feel you need to start with at least a rough estimate of, this is what our income is going to be. This is what the cost is going to be. Here's the bottom line. How can we adjust that? So look, I know it's not a money maker.
right,
You know, they're probably going to go into the red. But like we just said, if you have 3 or 4 of them and it's 500,000 in the red, and we do one and it's $50,000 in the red, well, that's a heck of a lot better than the
right,
alternative.
right.
So
And unfortunately, USPSA is not, a national government, so they,
can't just print
as
money.
an right, as an organization, they physically cannot operate in the red year over year, right? Like, that,
Right.
they can't just go into debt, because eventually, who's going to give the org money to put on events? Like,
Yeah.
are the area directors self financing the org? If they are, like, that's retarded, but I don't think they are. It just, where's the money coming from? And eventually, if there is some sort of bank account paying for this, is that's going to run dry, right? So like, it's got to be, the whole org's got to be positive on average over time. Otherwise, it's fundamentally gonna die. Like, it's, economics. You
Right.
can't go into debt infinitely, unlike the U.S. government.
Right. Now, I noticed that PSL is or PCSL is coming out with a classifier system. Did you help with that at all?
I will be helping them with some of the data analytics. I've
Okay.
got some of the I've got the data from them from I guess the two matches where they've had classifiers. So yeah, we'll be posting my analysis of them here in the coming days and weeks, probably sooner than later. Um, and one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to actually look at USPSA, like national events that have new classifiers, like how the national scores compare um, against the full bell curve after 5 years, right? So like basically to come up with a relative number of, like, say, everyone at nationals is shooting conservatively because they want to win the match, hopefully, and not zero or heroing this potential classifier, right? So
Right.
so what I want to do is look at, like, how does the top guys shooting conservatively compare against 5 years worth of data of everyone zero or heroing it, and use that as like a, here's a recommended, like, initial high hit factor from the national scores from the PCSL event. And then I've been also working with them as, like, hey, like, we need to come up with some very well defined, repeatable, consistent way of setting high hit factor. And Max, and I think Marcel is helping Max as well. Max Leo Grandis. We talked a little bit, and they're like, yeah, like, we need to come up with a defined way. Max will decide what it is. But so I'm gonna make some recommendations of, like, here's what I think hit factor should be initially, until there's enough data to set up a consistent high hit factor methodology. And I, like, personally recommend, I like that 1% GM, that top 1% equals GM. And I think he's currently thinking of a similar, like, high hit factor classification system. And I floated the idea of the rating skill, and I think Max isn't super interested in the rating skill system just because of the siloing between sections. Like, if there's not enough people shooting against each other in other states, then the rating system could go wrong. So he's interested in the classifier, like traditional classifiers. But yeah, I'll be working with them to help him come up with a way to set high hit factor.
Okay. And what do you have? What do you have set for 2024? Anything other than finishing your PhD?
Finishing my PhD. So I help run 5 matches locally.
Oh
So
wow.
one thing, yeah, I've overcommitted myself, but hey, man, I like shooting, right? So
Nothing wrong with that.
so I want to run, like, my goal helping run matches, or as match director, is, like, to run matches that people want to come back and shoot, right? And not just, like, fun matches, but also, like, challenging high skill matches that people want to come back and shoot. So I do that. So I run, also not so I run USPSA matches, as well as I run a tactical rifle match where uh, we basically do the same thing but with AR-15s. So we've got our tactical rifle match. It's similar to PCSL. At least we're actually using PCSL rules, but it's a one gun rifle only match where we've got stages that are kind of like traditional USPSA stages, where they're in close quarters type stages. And we've got our range. We have berm out to 400 yards, so we do a couple stages where it's like 0 to 400 yards shooting, and they're kind of more positional shooting against steel targets. And hey, like, it's fun. You go be good with an AR-15 and not just rage blast at close distance, which is also fun too. So I run that match with another guy. We're co-match direct that, and it's a lot of fun. And like I said, we use PCSL rules, and we actually add an addendum to that. We added a couple extra divisions, as well as so. I wrote my own rule book too, called the American Practical Shooting League. I know some of you guys may have seen that.
Oh, I have
Yep.
seen that. I didn't know who that was. That's
Yeah,
you.
that's me. So
Oh,
I wrote that,
okay.
and the main motivation for that originally was I wanted a rule book for that tactical rifle match because we didn't have one formally. We were just like, yeah, we're USPS safety rules, but we have our own division. So I wrote that, um, and we merged the rifle divisions with PCSL. So we're basically PCSL plus two divisions. And Yeah, so I wrote that, and the other, I also wrote some pistol rules too, pistol divisions, which
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of, and I'm also trying to convince Max to maybe incorporate some of my ideas into PCSL. Um, um, and part of, yeah, the other reason for that is pistol wise, like if we're going to shoot outlaw pistol, is a lot of the USPSA divisions, in my opinion, don't make any sense. They're kind of arbitrary, especially with the new edition of limited optics. Is And I even have data on limited optics from this year, which we can talk a little bit about too. Um, but limited optics is, in my opinion, identical to carry optics, right? So carry optics, if we dial back time, right, it's kind of based on production, and over time we've adjusted carry optics rules where it's basically a pseudo race gun, right? Like my Shadow 2, and the trigger kit I have in my Shadow 2 in single action is just as good as most 2011s, and even some of the best 2011s. Like I have a friend who has an Atlas Athena, and he says my single action trigger is the same as his Atlas Athena, but it's a joke. So
Oh,
his
wow.
Atlas Athena can't be in carry optics, but my Shadow 2 can be, right? And
Right.
even though like they're almost identical, so to me, I think it's silly. Looking at the scores from this year too for limited optics on average is only zero point 0.1 hit factor better than carry optics, which is arbitrary to me. It's throw it out, it's the same. Zero point 0.1 is no real difference. But yeah, so I see you got
Hmm.
the divisions here posted, and so our thought is, and I've worked with some top 25 shooters in open and limited, and I've talked to them like, hey, if you are shooting minor scoring only, right? So minor scoring only, is your tricked out 2011 race gun? Can you shoot that any better in minor only with minor power factor ammo than a Shadow 2 that's tuned? And the answer tends to be kind of no. Like, or sorry, they're about the same. There's no real major
Okay.
advantage with a comp when you're shooting minor power factor ammo. They're about equivalent. And so what what I did is basically we've got iron sight division and an optics division. And essentially, and I've even changed it since a little bit since then. I need to actually post the rule book or a link to the current rule book. But in optics, it's and in irons, it's compensators, barrel ports, all that stuff's allowed. Mag capacity is allowed. So we just got an iron division and an optics division. And for mag capacity, what I wanted to do, and what the group of us wanted to do, is make it not make divisions make more sense on how you compete with them rather than gear specific things. So in mag capacity, we say there's no mag limits. However, for stages that require 20 or more shots, you must make a mandatory reload between your first shot and your last shot. Right. So now, if
Okay.
you run a factory 21 round mag, or if you run 170 millimeter mag, whatever, right? Like it's you got to make a reload at some point in there. Um, and so that the thought was is like now it's based on you as the shooter deciding when and where to make your reload rather than forced you based on a division gear requirement, right? And so that way it's more focused on the competition aspect of shooting rather than the skill side of shooting rather than the gear itself. Um,
But you could definitely game it because I do have a brass +9 base pad from Taylor Freelance that would now allow me to get like 27 rounds in my mag
yeah,
plus one in the chamber. Now I have a wider variety of when I can change mags. You know what I mean?
yeah, yeah,
So now I can do it while I'm moving
yeah,
versus, only having 20 plus one or 22 plus one or whatever. And, really having to fine tune it more.
yeah,
So I like
exactly.
it.
So we make it where you can decide when you want to do that, and as well as like, hey, if you want to run a 50 round drum in your pistol, you can. You just got to reload at some point. And anyone who's ever
Oh,
run a drum and a pistol realizes that's really dumb because all that weight and mass just makes the
that's
gun handle
hilarious.
worse, right? So like you could, but it's not a good idea, right? So
I want to see you
so it
holster
allows
it.
you exactly. Um, so I also put suppressors allowed, at least for the moment, in my
I
opinion,
saw
with
that.
supersonic ammo, and as long as you have a safe holster, right? I think a lot of modern timers can pick up supersonic suppressed ammo.
Okay.
And in my experience as a match director with our timers, we can, right? Like I've been able to easily pick up shot times as long as the RO is correct and in the right spot, can pick up shot times even from an MP5, right? The
Well,
suppressed
and
MP5.
the sensitivity is set right. Yeah.
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 So I think it's doable. So I think as a Second Amendment guy, like why artificially restrict suppressors, right? Like if the match, if you as a match director want to allow it and put in the effort uh, to allow to tune your timers and make sure everyone's timing correctly, then why not? It's competitively a suppressor does not make you competitive. Anyone who's ever shot a suppressor in a pistol will know it makes the shooting worse. Uh, but it's cool and we can do it because we're American.
Now, I
Yeah,
thought this was interesting. So you did a classic. Is this for like your single stack, that type of
yeah,
thing, or
yeah,
revolver, so that it makes it a little? They get
yeah.
their
So
division.
yeah. So that was the intent with classic is if guys that want to like normally shoot production want to stay with tens, or single stack guys want to show up and they don't want to compete against guys with 30 round sticks, or the revolver guys want to shoot the match, you can still do it. And my thing too is like, hey, do whatever you want to the gun, optics, irons, whatever, just 10 round max. And I've even thought about a lightweight division, which I haven't posted that, but a lightweight division where same thing, do whatever you want to your gun, optics, irons, magwell, no magwell, whatever. However, the only requirement is the unloaded gun without a magazine has to be less than 32 ounces, right? So then you can kind of min max and play around with how you want your gun set up, um,
So if
as
you
well as
wanted to,
yeah,
if you carry a compact gun and you wanted to shoot that in competition, that would be that
yeah,
category.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So yeah, so I've like I said, I've written rule book. It's kind of in a provisional state, and I'm working with Max Leo Grandis and his team, you know, maybe to incorporate some of my ideas in the PCSL. But yeah, I think there's potential here in this alternative version of the sport.
Interesting. So I assume then with the updated rules that with comps being allowed in the optics pistol division, then your open guns would fit there.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
And it could be a matter of like, so I know like some people might not like that concept, and it could be a matter of like if this were to actually grow, which I doubt it will, but if it were to actually grow, like that's obvious that we need a separate open gun division. Like we could do that, like move it and make them their own traditional open division. So
Yeah, because I mean, I could see where, I mean, even with a limited optics gun, you're not going to. I guess you could put a comp on it, though. You could put a comp on anything you wanted. So even carry optics guns can take a comp. So you could really flatten it out.
yeah, and I've within the rule book too is there's only minor scoring, so there's no major scoring at all. Um,
Oh, I really like that.
yeah, and
Because me,
yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I'm sorry. Well, I was just going to say that I feel like the I know why they do major scoring. I get
Mhm.
it, makes perfect sense, but I also feel like in a way, while you're incentivizing speed, you're rewarding slop at times because you can get deltas and still get an extra point in there, and I don't mean tight deltas either. You can just be loose
Yeah,
and I'm me coming from more of an accuracy background. I hate seeing that kind of. I feel like the if you want to give him an extra point for a Charlie, I'm down with that.
yeah,
But maybe keep deltas the same
yeah,
because we shouldn't be rewarding deltas.
yeah, yeah. No, I agree with you. I think yeah, that I'm a fan of minor scoring, just because it's yeah rewards accuracy over pure pay and spray, and I think that's what practical shooting is about anyway, right? Is fast. Like we do, like speed
But
isn't
accurate.
super important, but accuracy at speed is what
Yep.
really wins the day, and I think we should value that in our sport too. So I'm a fan of minor only, and so like having the race gun in that, like right, as long as we're minor only, like there's less of a difference than people want to admit. I think the biggest difference in open really is the major power factor scoring and a frame mounted optic, as well as just mag size too. But like those, I think, are the biggest reasons why open is so much faster and better than higher scoring than other divisions is purely that major power factor, or
Okay.
very considerably the major power factor itself. So,
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. But
but
with
as
the
we
but
sorry
with the
as
comp, it makes it
yeah
feel like a light nine. So yeah.
yeah yeah exactly
Yeah. I'm with you.
yeah.
What were you going to say before I
Uh,
so rudely interrupted?
sorry. So I was gonna say as we've seen in USPSA, is kind of open is dying in general, and I think there's multiple reasons for that. I think the simplest reason is they're expensive, and a lot of people locally don't want to invest in expensive guns. Um, and the other reason I think is because of carry optics and now limited optics too. Is you can shoot more affordably incredibly good guns without buying a $10,000 gun and then worrying about reloading for to feed the gun.
Right.
And so I think those two factors are just like open's kind of dying anyway. So do we really need a special division for open if nobody's really shooting open as much anymore? Um,
Right. And if you look at the numbers, like I did have Jake and Rick on in December,
mhm.
and that was one of the things we talked about was the participation numbers. And if you add limited optics and carry optics, it is 50% of all participation.
Yeah, yeah,
So they are taking over the sport.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and uh, in one of my posts too, like I have just over time, year after year, you can see like carry optics just absolutely growing and dominating the sport. Um,
Yeah. Let me
yeah,
go back to uh, let me go back to your page here real quick.
yeah,
Like everybody's going to see our messages. All right.
yeah.
Oh boy. I guess it's down a little bit.
Right, right there, right the bar chart right in the middle.
This one?
Yeah, yeah. So this is
Ah, okay. I see what you did. Yeah.
yeah, this is breakdown by division, by activity, and then also by classification. So and you see, so
Right.
that's 2018. You see the iron sight divisions are dominating. Limited in production was big back then,
Mm-hmm.
and every year after that, um, if you click over to each slide, it's like carry optics progressively gets more and more dominant.
Yep. And there it goes. There it goes. There it
Yeah,
goes.
and if
Yeah.
I were to update this to include limited optics, I'm sure it'd be even, like you said, 50%, and it'd be even greater.
Right. Same thing you were saying in
Yeah.
2018, it was only 10%. Then 16, 23, 30, 36, 41.
Hmm.
And I added, let me see. I thought I had, this must be the one without the limited optics
Mm.
added in, but limited optics ended up being like 8 to 10% for
Yeah.
the year. So,
So 50%. Yeah.
yeah. And you can see where like limited 10 has in the last 5 years has never been anything. So
Right.
I don't even know why that's an argument to keep it.
I agree.
Um, Revolvers changed a little bit. Single stacks dipped in half. PCC has stayed the same. It peaked at, at about 12.5%, almost
Yeah.
13. But yeah, production's gone from almost 22% to 6. So
Yeah.
it's seen a huge hit.
Yeah.
Limited, same thing, 26 to
Yeah.
11. So yeah, those iron sights divisions are not going to last long at this point,
Yeah.
participation wise. Anyway, whoop, there
Right.
we go.
So yeah, it's so I yeah, so I can see. I assume part of the reason why they came up with limited optics is to not have 50-60% of shooters in one division, which okay, I think there's an argument for that, but like to me the technical differences between limited optics and carry optics is so tiny, and the performance margin between them are also so tiny that I think it's silly to prevent 2011s from being in carry optics. Um, but I think if they were to re-change the rules to where carry optics was much closer to production optics in IPSC,
Yeah,
where there's more restrictions on what you can do to the gun, then I think there
yeah,
might be some room for some differences where, or maybe even 15 round capacity where, you know, production carry optics should be a, in theory, close to your carry gun, which, come on, how many of us are shooting our carry gun or similar to our carry gun and carry optics? And it's like no one. So if we wanted to have a division that's close to a factory carry op, a carry gun, then carry optics isn't it right now. And so, like, if I could see the argument of limited optics if carry optics was closer to that, but it's not. It's carry optics and limited optics are virtually identical right now, and so it's yeah,
yeah,
it's silly to me.
yeah. They definitely need to either combine them or differentiate them better.
Yeah,
So
yeah, right. But I think either way, a lot of people I think in 2024 are gonna like limited optics is gonna grow. Um, and I think in general, a lot of like within the current group in USPSA, the average shooter, I think a lot of people like shooting the same division as each other, right? Because you're more competitive, like just to compete against people in your same division. Like I think there's more interest in that today than there were maybe even 5 years ago. Like more people wanted to shoot their gun, and now I think there might be more interest in people wanting to shoot against the good people. Like whatever the heat is locally, I think the majority of people want to shoot against that heat. And so I think like if top guys move to limited optics, I think a lot of people are going to start shooting limited optics for the same reason.
yeah, I can't disagree with you there. So
Yeah,
everybody will go where the heat is, and or in this case, the whatever the optic division is, because
yeah,
optics are just growing. Because I mean, 5 years ago, nobody put optics on their guns; they were too
right,
unreliable, or their carry guns. I mean, or
yeah,
whatever, state a reason why. But now it's
right.
like everybody's doing it.
Right. And I remember that there used to be the logic of like optics are harder to learn, or you're not as good with them, or they're
Right?
lower
They're
skill,
slow.
or whatever
Yeah,
it may be. That I think has just been proved out by competition shooting that like no, optics are actually good.
yeah.
Yeah.
Even an IDPA, same thing. It's
Yeah.
showing that optics are the future. So,
Yeah. So yeah, but yeah, I think if they made limited optics because they wanted to split up carry optics, I think that was a silly decision. if they wanted to made limited optics because they wanted 2011s, I think that's also a silly decision because they could have just allowed carry 2011s and carry optics, right? So that who knows why they made that decision, but we can now shoot these type of guns in a similar division. So I think that's where people
Right.
are going to go. So
I do like that they made it a provisional one, so at least they're capturing the data. Now you can actually make an educated decision as to what to do with it.
yeah,
And if the classifier data is showing that there's really no difference between carry optics and limited optics, well then maybe you just open, you either keep limited optics and you migrate there, or you just open up the rules for carry optics and include the 2011s.
yeah. And so for the classifiers that I have looked at, which I've only looked at a couple of them, um, it does look like the difference between limited optics and carry optics is marginal at best, in terms of pure performance numbers. So I think, yeah, I think they should be merged one way or another.
Okay. So no reason, unless we talked about like a production optics.
Yeah,
If you don't keep carry optics and limited optics, but if you're going to create a production optics and some other, maybe that's where you make the determination of product. You change carry optics to production optics and keep limited optics, however you want to do it. But
yeah, yeah. Like I think, especially now that they're gonna allegedly gonna change production to 15 round capacity, like I think it would make sense to turn carry optics into 15 round capacity. Um, now that limited optics exists. So
okay, yeah, I think that would be the way to do it. So
yeah, yeah. So that way, like, because I've also thought about like a tiered system for guns kind of makes sense too, of like you've got your factory guns, and then like the next level up, which is kind of like your Shadow 2, tricked out Shadow 2. Like there's that level of gun, and then next level up, you've got your super tricked out guns like open guns. So we used to have that concept with production limited and then open, um, of that like three tiered type system, and now we've kind of with how production or how carry optics and limited exists, we don't like and limited optics and so on. It's like we no longer have that tiered concept at play, um, anymore, in practice. So
and that's a good point. I don't think I've really heard anybody mention that tiered system, but yeah, you're right.
yeah, that's
You
like I
if
feel like
you
that's the way it used to be, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
and if you bring carry optics down to production optics, then you have limited optics and open. Then you
yeah,
do have that tiered system once again.
yeah.
It's a good
um
idea.
and I've heard in other sports like car racing, and I've seen like NRL 22 is actually a great example of this. Is the way they have their divisions. So I haven't looked super closely. So yeah, I don't have it memorized since I don't shoot the sport, but I've looked at it, and the way their system works is it's kind of like a tiered system, and but it's based on like the MSRP of your equipment, right? So for example, like if say we were to say carry optics, let's say the MSRP of the gun optic and of the gun plus the optic, if we set a like $2,000 limit, right? And now everything under anything that's less than $2,000 can be shot in carry optics, right? That at that point that precludes your atlases and your other 2011s that are really nice, right? um
Right.
and so you could like that could be a way of doing it, and NRL 22 does it, with their rifle divisions, is really just financial based, and that would be really the only difficult thing is that'd be hard to like evaluate. At the gear check is you got to have somebody with a list of equipment and prices and stuff, and they have it like the price is set at the beginning of the season, so whatever the prices were today, January 1st, 2024, would set like how the rest of the year would be. So like if you show up at nationals this year and you've got a new gun that came out after January 1st, well you wouldn't be allowed in that division anymore. But if the or if you had like a CZ Shadow 2 and the price raised, and now it's not, it's above $22,000, well, you'd still be allowed because at January 1st it was this price. But so like that could be one way of doing it. It'd just be harder to enforce. So
Right. Now, how hard would it be though, since you've done some software stuff? USPSA, they make you take that survey before nationals. What if they used that data that you put in about your gun and your equipment? How hard would it be for that to automatically calculate your division and populate that into nationals registration?
uh I mean, you'd have to have a thoroughly detailed survey system, and then
But would you
so
need more than the gun itself and the optic?
well, it would depend on how you define it, right? But if it was just gun and optic, I mean, it could be fairly easy to implement. Um, and then you'd have to have a gear check to make sure, like, hey, did what they filled out in the survey actually correct?
Right, but
But
if you show up like, and I bring this up because someone had mentioned it with IPSC, like when you go to check in for the match, when you go to registration, you've got to prove all that information so it's done that
yeah,
day, you
yeah,
know. So
yeah.
I feel
So
like that would be the way to do it.
yeah. I mean, you could fairly easily have come up with like a survey where you got to fill out questionnaire, you got to fill out and make it digital and have all the prices like in a database already ready to go. So
Yeah.
like yeah, I mean that wouldn't be too difficult to do, no. But it would
Okay.
require people that would be able to program it, and then also update continually update the equipment list every year, essentially.
Yeah, but like you said, if you did it once every year on January 1st, that first week of
Yeah,
January,
yeah,
then I feel like it's a one-time thing. It's done for the entire rest of the year. You
yeah.
don't have to worry about it.
And feasibly, if they were to do it that way, they could also have like some like drop down checklist on their website where you could check beforehand. Like I could, say next week after they publish the new prices, you could go to their website and say, "Here's my gun. Here's this. What's the MSRP?" And then get your, "Hey, do you pass this year before you even go into your first match?" So yeah, I mean that could be done.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
It doesn't seem complicated, but I don't do that stuff, so I'm not
right.
going to say it is or isn't. It
Yeah,
could be more involved than I think.
I feel like the programming would be not that difficult. I think the difficult thing would be going to get accurate MSRPs for everything that could show up at a match, right? And that could get more time consuming for a person to go and populate that data table.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think you'd have to decide that, like a CZ10, this is the price, but at what point do you start adding all the different modifications in, and at
Yeah,
what point does it break over? So
yeah,
yeah, it would just
right,
be, it
right,
could get complicated in that regard.
yeah. But hey, that is an option of way things could be done. But I think at least for me that concept kind of goes against like the performance based rules versus equipment specific based rules.
Right.
Like I think the rules should revolve around a performance, right? Like if we think say frame mounted optics is a competitive advantage, then you would have a performance based rule based on frame mounted optics. But if you just say, well, 2011s are better than SIGs, so we're gonna not allow 2011s in this division. I don't think that's good. I think that's a bit more arbitrary. Just like USPSA's formal rule about CZs have to be fully decocked and not half decocked is kind of based on some arbitrary person saying, well, half decocked is slightly lighter than fully decocked, so you shouldn't be allowed. But if you have a decocker model, you can put it in half cock, which is the decock position, because that's a decocker. Like that's just dumb. Like no, just make it performance based. Like either DA in a
Right.
safe manner, which is half cock, or single action safety on. Like that. that should be it. Like not not some weird arbitrary. Well, somebody said this gun's better in this configuration.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, Kurt,
yeah.
that's what I had. Is there was there anything else that we talked about that you meant to go back and clarify, or anything you want to add?
Let me think. I don't know. So I think we've covered a lot of my data and stuff, but yeah. Well,
For sure.
also this is my first time coming public with my personality because so when I started this was in the kind of the height of Derek and everyone else being banned by USPSA for doing stuff on social media. So I was really paranoid about getting banned, and I know the Area 2 director was furiously trying to find who I was when I first started posting. Whether they care about me now anymore, who knows? But I was worried about getting banned. But I've decided, especially given the current circumstances with USPSA, is I don't really care if I get banned. I'll just shoot matches locally. I know my local people, love me, especially since I actually host matches. So I don't, even if I get banned, I don't think my local people will ban me. If we switch over to other outlaw matches like PCSL or APSL or whatever it may be, we can still run those matches. Like it doesn't really matter. Like if the board doesn't let me go to nationals, like who cares? I know I'm not good enough to place well at nationals. I don't want to spend the money to go to nationals. I don't want to give my money to USPSA at the moment. So I don't really care that much, but I also think it'd be silly for them to ban me formally anyway. I don't think they will anyway, but
I don't think so.
uh,
You've
it's just
been,
one of those that like, yeah,
I mean, all the stuff you've posted is just statistical numbers that are
yeah,
factual. It's not opinion based. It's like, other than the recommended hit factors, but that's still based on numbers and that
yeah,
1%. So there's still a
yeah,
logical conclusion. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't think you've done anything.
But yeah, if anyone wants to, so my personal shooting account is McKenna underscore shooting, and that's where I post my own matches. That's my personal account. I post match stuff for like kind of what I've been doing equipment wise, because I'm a tinkerer, but at heart too. I'm an engineer. I like playing around with stuff. So you can see I took a CZ 75 pre-B surplus pistol and did all the gunsmithing to fit a Shadow 2 slide, modern trigger, and magazines into it. And because, um, like, I'm of the opinion that like there is a maximum weight on a gun before you start having uh, like recoil issues and bouncing and stuff by having a too heavy of a gun. So I was
Right.
playing around with the short dust cover and what can that do for me. So I'm a tinkerer. It's fun. That's what I've been up to lately is just little stuff
Well,
like
you're an
that.
engineer. I
Yeah,
expect it.
yeah, yeah,
That's what you guys do.
yep,
And
yep,
there's the comp. There you go.
yep. Yeah, that's the 507 comp sitting on top of it. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Nice.
I love that gun. It's fun to shoot. Um, and then yeah, what else about me? I guess yeah, I'll be trying or will be will be graduating with my PhD this year. So
Woohoo.
if you guys don't see much post from me, that's probably
That's
because
why.
I need to be actually focusing on doing that rather than the fun data stuff. Even though I know everyone wants to see the fun data stuff, but that takes time, and my
Yeah.
wife wants me to graduate. I want to graduate.
It's definitely time consuming. So,
Yeah,
well,
but yeah, I
Kurt, I
appreciate it,
appreciate
Dave.
you coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
I'm going to put I'll put your McKenna shooting plus your practical shooting analytics and the APSL in the show
Yeah,
notes. So people
awesome.
can just click on that.
Yeah, and I'll probably I need to update the posts for APSL, and I'll probably start adding some stuff over there. Like I said, things to look out
Okay.
very soon. I'll be posting some stuff on the PCSL classifiers. So
Okay, we'll definitely be looking
Yeah.
forward to that then.
All right. Well, thanks, Dave.
All right. Good luck, Kurt.
Appreciate it.
Until next time.
Don't be a little bitch.
Yeah.